Hey guys, it's Roderick. I'm here with another review of The Real Housewives of New Jersey, Season 13, Episode 6, All Bats Are Off. First, I want to apologize for how late you're getting this video. I was going to weave this lie about technical difficulties, but the truth is, I wanted to wait until I got my hair cut and I was shaved so that I wasn't looking like scraggly homeless man tees all over YouTube or whatever. So I apologize. I will be definitely better with the upcoming weeks. Okay, so let's just get into it because this episode kind of wasn't a lot, but it was, which kind of really gave me the indication that there wasn't a whole lot of useful footage or coverage. So either the producers didn't shoot enough to get enough meaningful moments, or the moments that they did shoot, there wasn't enough because we got a lot of small snippets, but not a whole lot until like the very end. So that, because I was giving production, really kudos because the season has been really good, but this episode was a little, excuse me, because there are a few things I'm going to call bogus on during this episode. So, but overall, still loving the season, but this is probably like the dip of the season so far. So, we start off with, these three little teasers. I call them teasers because nothing really happens. It's just like where the people are. And Bravo does that kind of like with a lot of their shows, and I don't really understand why, because it's not like they're teasers as in like a regular like serial or narrative fictional drama, because they never come back to their moments. It's Danielle driving her kid to school, Dolores and Paulie, and Marge at the hospital. So again, I'd rather them just start the episode with the first scene as opposed to throwing in these couple of bites. But that gives me indication that, the reason they're doing that is just, I think, just because they don't have enough coverage or enough usable footage, because we really don't need those, these three scenes. Nothing happened. They weren't really talking about Danielle and her daughter are cute. Marge was getting surgery. Paulie, Delores, okay, whatever, right? Except for the Paulie and Delores thing, which we do kind of come back to, everything else was kind of superfluous, but this is minor. So let's get to the big one. So our first scene for the show is Teresa at the therapist, which I give kudos to anyone who's going to seeking therapy, trying to make themselves better, trying to, really improve themselves. So I'm never going to down Teresa on getting therapy, but, one of the things about getting therapy and then getting therapy on television is a totally different thing, right? So when you're sitting there in front of the therapist's office, there's a natural inclination when you first start getting therapy or start seeing a therapist to start editing yourself or start presenting yourself in a way in which you hope the therapist will like to see you, right? And eventually, as you keep seeing the therapist and they break down that wall and you start talking about different truths and different things happening to your life and you establish a certain level of trust, the walls can come down and you can be really authentic with your therapist and really be vulnerable and really get to the crux of the matters that occur. The problem is that therapy that occurs on television, you have two layers, right? You have the layer that you're presenting to the therapist and the wall up for the therapist, then you have the wall up for the television. So that's why whenever I see people in reality shows getting therapy, unless it's Iyanla Fix My Life, right? And even that show had its problems because a lot of the people, especially when Iyanla would try to help people who were reality television stars, which she did not like to do because they were so caught up in creating or keeping their brand and their image as opposed to really seeking the truth and doing the work. So I just don't know whether this was, hey, Teresa, we need to shoot a scene with your therapist. Let's show to the therapist, or, hey, I'm going to the therapist on Wednesday. You all are welcome to come, right? So the problem is that the way this looks like they've seen each other before, but the way in which Teresa's talking to the therapist, it's as if she's again has this wall up and she's not really being authentic about what's hurting her. And not to say that there weren't some authentic moments, because the truth is, as I was watching this, I was like, what? Antonia didn't go to Melania's Sweet 16? Total bogus on that, right? And because even if she did have a cheer competition or whatever, if what Melissa told us last episode that family was so important, Antonia could have missed a cheer competition, right? Or something, I was very disappointed when I heard that snippet that she missed it, because as you see later in the episode, all things are not well with the cousins. And I really thought from when we watched the last episode that things were, and they're not, right? So I really call bogus on that. And I also call BS on Teresa when she's talking about her relationship with her brother Joe, and we get kind of like the 50,000 feet above look about the battle of the Gorgas, right? She's like, oh, I'm so scared of my brother, and oh, he has this really bad temper. Bitch, have you looked in the mirror? Like, your temper ain't Pollyanna either, right? So the only reason you're scared of your brother is because you're scared he may pop you in your mouth, right? So that's the only thing you may be scared of. You ain't scared he's gonna flip no tables. He's scared he may choke the dog fuck out of you while you're pulling your bullshit, right? So I kind of had to call BS on that, and that kind of goes into the presenting what you want the therapist to see and presenting what you want the television audience to see as well. But again, I have to give her a pass. She gets to see for this whole thing because Teresa is seeking help. And as I said earlier, this is Teresa's arc. Like, this season is all about Teresa's arc and being the different type of Teresa who we've seen for the past 13 seasons. Like, even when they were showing footage of her and her anger and whatever, I don't really believe Teresa's in that space anymore, right? For whatever reason. And it may be because she's Louis, or whatever like that. But, I really do believe that Teresa is on that path to change. How much, how little, who knows, right? So I can't be mad at her at seeing therapy for that. Then we get Marge and Jen Fessler. And you know what? Jen Fessler has really grown on me over the years. I've really, really enjoyed her. And I'm really enjoying her because, again, she's really kind of occupying that Eileen Davidson role of being the real common sense, authentic friend to the potentially crazy whatever, right? So if you take Marge and Jen Fessler and just replace that, if you watch Real Housewives of Beverly Hills with like Eileen and Lisa Rinna, when they both kind of came on the show about the same time, that's what they're giving me, and that's what I really enjoy. Because the problem, like, one of the problems with this show is these women go on these weird delusional self-contained tangents, like reading the newspaper that they print, and there's nobody in the cast of the show to be like, girl, what? Girl, what? Girl, you did it? Huh? What? Because in real life, and most people, right, have someone in their life, you could tell them a story and tell them what happened, and they'd be like, oh, now, girl, now you know you were wrong for that. Now you know you shouldn't have done that. I like that Jen Fessler role, right? So I don't want her to be, like I said, I don't want her to be a cast member. I just need her to be, because she's not even Jiminy Cricket, right? She's just being like, hey, I'm here for the bullshit, I'm here for the fun, but girl, don't show your slip because that's not really it, right? And that's really what Jen Fessler says to Marge, being like, look, you really came all the way out yourself, and that's not a good look on you. And she's like, I don't care what Jennifer Aydin did because she's not my concern. You are my concern, and that's not a good look for you. So as my friend, I don't want you to be able to be in that space anymore, right? So I really, really enjoyed that. Then we get to the Aydins, right? So the kids now, it's summer break. Jen has the kids doing chores around the house, whatever, right? Like, they don't have a whole ass housekeepers to do this, but keep play in my face, right? It's, it's almost St. Patrick's Day, play in my face if you want to, right? So anyway, Jen goes outside to sit with Bill. And every time Jen sits with Bill, he has these scenes with her. Like, it's obvious that if it was up to Bill, he would not be on this show, right? But because she really doesn't have a storyline that kind of, like, her family life can't be the kids, right? It has to be her relationship with her husband. So Bill pretty much has to be on this show, or otherwise Jen would be running around doing more crazy things, right? So every time she sits down, he has this like, here the fuck. He's like, oh my God, he's like the living embodiment of that Ben Affleck meme when Ben Affleck is sitting outside like smoking or whatever, and he's like, fuck my life. That is Bill's energy every time Jen comes around, right? Because if she is like this, just how we see her on television, I can only imagine what it is living with her with the type of high stress job that he has, right? Like, literally, but we'll get to kind of that in a second. But so anyway, she sits down. He's like, okay, camera's here. Let's start this bullshit. So she starts, right? So she's like, oh my God, whatever. And I don't want you to be that nice to Margaret when you see her because she was saying all this stuff. Like, Jen has a storytelling problem, right? And if you listen to the way in which Jen tells or recounts stories or factual situations that can't be verified, she always wants to cast herself as the victim, right? When in reality, there's only one situation where she is truly, really the victim, right? And that's when he cheated on her. But all these other situations with these ladies, she likes to like, what they say, throw rocks and hide hands, right? So she wants to be a victim in a situation that she really 9 times out of 10, she typically caused, right? And she's like, don't be that nice to Margaret. And he was looking at her like, bitch, what? And you know I don't get involved in all your little fuckery bullshit, woo, wah, wah, wah. And clearly I really like, okay, well, I won't say that. I was going to say something, but I was kind of say that for later, and it kind of was going to come out wrong anyway. But I really recognize that Bill also sees a secondary use for Jennifer being on this show, but we'll get to this in a second. So then we see Dolores and Paulie, right? And you know, Paulie's really growing on me, and Paulie is gonna really fuck around and not be in the scene with Frank for the whole season because he's not really here for the Frank bullshit, right? Every time like there's a Frank and Dolores thing, it's like, oh, okay, Paulie's sick. Paulie has something. Paulie's like, look, I'll show up for you and do this for you because you need, your relationship is literally the only thing that's keeping you on this show. I'll do this for you, but don't be trying to rope me in with this fuckery with your ex-husband and all his bullshit because Paulie can take or leave Frank, right? He's not in it for Frank, he's in it for Dolores. And I have to say, so then we get that late. So here's where production, like, I caught them, right? So last episode, Dolores was like, oh, I've done everything for 20 years. I sacrificed everything for my marriage, and now it's kind of like my turn. They literally used that same exact clip for this episode. So I was like, okay, you know we pay attention, production. Shame on you for that. But I have to say that, you know, kudos to Dolores for learning how to have boundaries, because I have to say is that she's doing great. I mean, she is literally doing great in creating boundaries and sticking to those boundaries, you know, and we'll see later on in the episode that she means what she says, right? And that is how you create boundaries. You say, these are the areas in which you can exist in my life. You cannot exist at this point. This is a priority. This is not a priority. Our relationship is going to have to change. It does not mean I want to end it, but this is whatever. And Dolores is really doing that. And I'm really, really happy for that. Now we get to the batting cages, right? So this whole batting cage scene or whatever, I felt like the producers thought they were going to get a lot more from this than what they really were going to get. And at the end, it really kind of landed with a buh, 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 right? Like a dun, 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 right? So it's the Fudas, Joe and Melissa, and then Frank and his girlfriend. But let's bring up this whole point, right? Okay, who are our cast members? Teresa, Jen Aydin, Danielle, Rachel Fuda, Marge, and Delores, right? Those are 6 cast members, right? The husbands, the men who show up on the show, so we have Jack is afraid of the show, we have Jen Fessler, right? And then we have the husbands, okay? So as I said, the husbands don't get paid to be in the show. The wives either decide to break them off, or if the husband's rich enough, they'd be like, keep your little change, and that way you'll keep your ass out of my pocket, right? So my question is, where is Frank and his girlfriend getting their money from, right? Because we noticed we saw a lot of Frank and his girlfriend, and I'm like, is Dolores like picking, is that coming out of Dolores' pocket? Or does Frank have like a friend of the show status now? Which I would not be mad about because I adore Frank, but I'm like, this is a lot of work, Frank, if you ain't really getting a whole lot of money, right? So I was like, who's paying them? So then we get Frank boo-hooing about this Paulie situation, which I'm kind of like, because Frank's reeks of kind of like he's an old school fuckboy, it totally seems realistic that he could be having a hard time with the way him and Dolores' relationship are changing. I also somehow don't believe that he does not understand why this relationship is changing. I do believe that he was very spoiled with Dr. David, because Dr. David was like, oh, perfect. If Frank's gonna be around all the time, if Frank's gonna do all this, I just gotta show up for dinners and fucking, and I don't have to do anything else. So I think that Frank was very spoiled by his relationship with David, and Paulie's not here for the shits, right? He's like, again, I'm all the man that she needs. She don't need no gap fillers. I don't need no step-ups. I don't need no subs. I got her on all accounts. And I think that is, again, very problematic for Frank, because if Dolores says that the only thing that did not change in their relationship from them being married to now is the fact that they stopped having sex. That's a very hard transition to make, right? So anyway, we'll get to that and get it, whatever. So then they start after they do the batting cage and the appetizers and the blah, 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 they start talking. So we get into Bravo's like, okay, bitches, these little steak sliders and all these bottles you got in pails ain't paying for themselves. So let's get to work, right? So something that Melissa brought up that never occurred to me is that the reason Jennifer Aydin has been so much kind of on this whole Marge villain train puppet master thing is that she's actually seeking revenge, right? For Marge outing their affair, 2 seasons ago or something, probably 2 seasons ago now. And it never occurred to me that I just always assumed that she was just, so 2 things can be true at the same time. I'm beginning to hate that phrase now because a lot of people are misusing it. But I think that Jennifer Aydin has taken a book out of Teresa's book of reality television, is being tutored by Teresa on how to be a better reality television star, and she is seeking her revenge on Marge, right? I think all those 3 things are existing. The question is, which is the primary, which is a secondary, and which is a tertiary, right? Because the fact is, I thought the primary was that she was just trying to be, Teresa's prized pupil, right? But really, it may be that this whole thing is that she's seeking revenge on Marge for outing Bill's affair, which we'll get to again in a second at the end about this whole thing. But I was like, well, that's very interesting. And the fact that with Teresa being upset with Marge from last season, it would then incline Teresa to be like, oh, let me teach you better how to do this. I think you should go after Marge, right? Because that'll make better television. And thereby, by proxy, right, Teresa can exact her revenge on Marge from last season, right? So these are all very new concepts. I'm not saying any of these are true, but I am going to test these theories out as I'm watching this. So by the time we get to the reunion, we can see if any of this is really true, right? Because I was just like, okay. And then, of course, Danielle does the whole bone carrier thing of Teresa told me about you and I should worry, all this stuff. And I don't get mad. I mean, you have to translate what's happened in the scenes where the people weren't there in order to keep the conflict going. I don't really like that anymore. I think there's a more efficient way or organic way for you to do it versus such and such tell you. But I'm also not I don't move like that in my real life. So I guess some women may do that. So I guess women may actually do that in their own social circles. So I'm like, okay, here we go. So that's going to keep all of that going to the next episode or whatever. So we get to the softball game, right? And I always enjoy the softball game because it's fun. Well, now it is blown up because the stands are getting full. People are like, I don't know if y'all noticed when Teresa was arriving, there are people outside cheering. So people know to show up, and it's almost like a mini BravoCon or whatever like that. So which I think is good because it helps a good cause. So Danielle recounts to Marge the whole thing. Oh, so Rachel Fuda was one who told Melissa at the softball game, it's Danielle who tells Marge, so Teresa says you're better off as a friend and not an enemy, right? And Jennifer Aydin, of course, theory is because Marge has dirt on all the people and everyone's scared of Marge. No, I'm not buying that at all, right? Like, I think the problem is people know that Marge will go just as low as you go, right? So the problem is no one wants to fuck around with Marge because she doesn't have that same level of stamina and endurance as Teresa. Like, I'm wearing an X-Men t-shirt with like 3 Omega level mutants on it, right? With the Omega level being there's no upward limit to their power, right? There is no upward limit to Teresa's ability to be angry, vengeful, and spiteful, right? So she's an Omega level, okay? Marge is just kind of on that regular path, right? So she's just a regular average, okay? But Teresa is the Omega level, like reality star, because she knows how to mix her anger for the television to get viewership, right? So they're just not on the same level, but they have the same skill set, right? Like telekinesis, but just to varying degrees, right? Anywho, we get there, everybody shows up, and did you notice how when Danielle was talking to Marge about what Teresa said, Delores was giving her the straight side eye, right? Because I think even though Dolores recognizes why she was happening, she was like, bitch, now you know you shouldn't be that messy. And I noticed how quiet Dolores was, right? Because that would have been the moment for Dolores, as Teresa's longtime and closest friend, to be like, no, 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 that's not true. She really likes you. I think she was just, I'm always curious at those moments because Dolores and Teresa have a way of being quiet at the most important moments. And their silence conveys more than what they could have said, right? So I was just like, okay, that's interesting. So then the Aydins arrive, and I don't know. I just found Jen's look to be very problematic. Like, I do have a problem with white people wearing like cornrows and Petra braids or whatever like that. And like the way her lips were done, I guess she thought like, I'm going to Brooklyn. I need to look like I'm in Brooklyn. I just low emotional intelligence. Anyway, so then we get the more bullshit by production. So now Teresa comes in through the fanfare, and then Joe takes his child, Joey, and they run away from Teresa, run away from the entrance as they're going. I'm like, did Joe just run away from his sister walking in? And he comes is like, I just want to play nice. I just want to do whatever. And I'm like, I don't believe in this world, on Beyonce's internet, or even Al Gore's internet, that there will be a moment in which you don't want to see your sister as she walks in a room, right? Because all that is a hi and bye, bitch, right? That's all that is, right? So I just feel like this is, again, an active role to keep this battle of the Gorgas going, right? So again, every instance we have where Joe could squash it, de-escalate it, make it okay, he just chooses not to do it. But we did get a nice kind of moment when like they all look at the calendar, which turned out well, and all the cousins were there, and it seemed like you had a moment, right? You know, and I was just like, this could be the moment all the time if y'all just choose to get along and say, look, I ain't gonna pop off at you, you don't pop off on me, we won't have a pop off party. That really is what they need to do, right? Even though there's a lot of hurt and whatever, the problem is that they can't get to the hurt because their mouths get in the way, and their mouths are lethal, right? Because I think Joe may be an Omega level reality star too, because he looks like he could tear some, because we've seen him tear shit up already too. So that's the problem, is two Omegas going at it at the same time. And that's what Teresa really doesn't want, because if she knows there's no upward limit to her anger and her theatrics, her brother probably possesses the same thing, and that's not what she wants. So anyway, the Aydin arrives, and Bill walks up to Margaret and is like, mwah, mwah. He wasn't that nice to her, but he wasn't throwing her the ice cold shade that, you know, Jennifer wanted. And I was like, good for you, Bill. Fuck her or whatever. So then they start playing, you know, the softball game, and it's not going well. And then Jennifer Aydin's like, well, the last time we had a professional athlete. And I'm like, yes, bring more Tiki back. But I doubt we're going to get any more Tiki this season. And then Jennifer talking to Rachel Fuda about, Rachel Fuda's like, oh, tells Jennifer that Olivia wants to be a couples therapist, which I don't know if I talked about that last episode, but I was like, ooh, ouch. Because that's an ouch moment, right? Because literally the child is like, I want to learn how to put couples together because clearly I raised up in this, in this environment where I don't, with bickering parents or whatever like that, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing, right? Like if you're raised up and you have a parent who's an alcoholic, you decide you want to be an alcoholic counselor, I don't think that's a bad thing. The problem is just that Jennifer Aydin is using her children as a shield to deflect and absorb, most of the hurt that she's feeling, right? Because in the real world, right, this affair would have come out, you would have talked about it, taking your kids to therapy, going to Disney World, and life moves on, right? But the fact is that we see, and we're going to take a digression here, that there's one of the things about this show that makes it kind of interesting / difficult to watch is that so much of their identity as people, as whole people, is their identity as a wife, right? And I'm not saying that you should be married and it should not be a major part of our identity, but who they are as women, as people, is so intertangled with them being wives and being the wife and mother that they think the world wants them to see, that they want the parents to see, then whenever we get a chink or a crack in it, they all seem to fall apart. And that seems to be a lot of what's going on with Jennifer Aydin with this situation. So anyway, I was like, okay, whatever. So then, hold on one second. Okay, so Jennifer starts. So this is the thing. So Jennifer starts saying, okay, she blames Marge for her children's pain, right? That's what she's been low-key doing. But the truth is, you are the source of your children's pain because you could have A, had told them when it happened, or B, not started any bullshit with Marge and not make Marge have to get back at you. See, Jennifer leaves this part of the story, right? She leaves the part of the story out where she was caught talking cash money shit about Marge and her affair and how she was an adulteress and all these things. And Margaret and Marge finally just said, oh, really? How about these apples? And Jennifer didn't like the taste of these apples. Stay the fuck out the apple business, right? Then you don't have to worry about apples. So that's the problem, right? Is that Marge just got tired and was like, I know you're not talking about someone being a cheater on me, and your husband went ahead and fool out loud or whatever. So she never would have had the affair would have stayed secret if Jennifer Aydin had not been fucking around with Marge. So that's on Jennifer Aydin. So I was just like, whatever. I was like, whatever. So then we have Dolores and Frank and another one of their scenes, right? Which we kind of always covered in the middle. But Frank was like, oh, I was crying, I was tearing up. And Dolores stood 10 toes, was like, look, this is what it is. Everything is still good, but how I interact with you, I have to take into account how Paulie feels. So your feelings are no longer the sole primary importance in our relationship. I have a man. His feelings come first. And I was like, there you go. And so Frank, who was that Frank's girlfriend who was the pitcher, the chick who had like the long, ridiculous weave pitching? Because I was like, who is that chick? But I was like, you got a whole ass girlfriend. Like, I don't understand. Like, that's how I'm kind of calling bullshit on this, because he's abnormally upset when most people be like, Dolores has a man, I have a chick, maybe I should pour more into this relationship to make up for the fact that Dolores isn't around. So that's why I'm just like, something fugazi is going on with that. But I was like, whatever. And here Dolores says, you can't make me feel guilty for being in a relationship that I deserve, right? And I was like, there you go. Perfect. So anyway, so we get this whole scene with the cousins, right? And, you know, Gia is very much her mother's daughter in that she has also learned how to do good reality TV. But I'm not going to call the child a whole ass liar, because if you look at the body language between the cousins as they were like talking, something was off. And when Gia's like, I don't get to see them as much as they do, they live practically in the same city, right? Their parents work together on a show. So if the cousins aren't seeing each other, I'm calling foul on Joe and Melissa, because that means that at least that I call foul, because at least it looks like you're trying to say, like you're saying one thing for the cameras, but in actuality, something different is totally happening, right? And if the cousins really are not seeing each other, shame on all of you all, right? Shame, shame, shame. Because again, the great thing about this show, Teresa, like the sibling who her father didn't speak to, is Rosie and Kathy's mother, right? Over $200. So we know what it's like for the cousins to be separated, because we saw the whole 2 or 3 seasons when Rosie and Kathy were on the show, and we saw how that happened. So shame, shame, shame on them if they really are fucking around with the kids and not have them get together, because Joe could have hid and let Joey see his aunt, Teresa, right? But we saw Joe take his child, Joey, with him when he went to go hide. So I do have to believe that G is telling the truth, is that there is some finagling with the children going on, and I just don't think that's right. So I just don't think that's right. So after the thing, I was like, okay, the show's over, baseball game, blah, 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 not much episode. Child, Bill and Jenna went to therapy. Child. So I'm like, because it said coming up, and I was like, coming up like next week or coming up next? They go to therapy. So they go see this therapist. Now, I'm not going to go in on this therapist because I'm not going to body shame or look shame or be ageist or whatever. But for a show on a network that highly promotes aspirational living, I feel like they could have found a therapist that was a little bit more on brand for the Bravo shows. I'll just leave it at that. Okay? Especially with New York City being so close. But I'm sure Bill did not want to fucking drive to New York City for a therapist because Bill did not look like he wanted to be there anyway. So I was like, okay. And it's very interesting how Jen tells the story, right? So Jen tells the story because she has to throw in, she was pregnant, he cheated, and then this woman took this information and used it against her. Jen leaves her part of the whole story out of it. She leaves everything that was going on in her and Bill's relationship during their affair, all the problems they could have been having, all the problems she ignored, all the problems she refuses to fix. Jen leaves its entire, like her part of the entire situation out, and she's literally the victim of Bill's infidelity and Marge's revenge, right? Which I'm sure if I saw this watching it, I'm sure the therapist saw that and wanted to call bullshit on that too, right? But again, we don't know how much of the empathy we saw, right? But I do know Bill's tired of her, right? And I think that Bill is staying on his show and letting this woman collect these checks, right? So that then when he decides to leave her, right, she can't be like all in his pocket for alimony and all this child support or whatever. Because Bill looks tired. The fact that he spends 3 hours in the pool house before he goes into his house means that he is like, this bitch and these fucking kids, fuck me. Like literally I think Bill is literally like, look at his watch, looking for another wife. I'm not saying I want their marriage to be over. I'm not hoping that's the case. I hope he's watching porn and jerking off. I'm hoping he's decided he's doing his charts. Maybe he's talking to his family back in Turkey. Who knows? I know the motherfucker don't want to be with her and the motherfucking kids because she's exhausting to watch on television. I can't imagine living with her and whatever. And let me just nip this in the bud about this subordinate, I'm your equal, I'm going to put up with this, whatever. All of that is true if you worked at the DMV and he worked at Target. But let's be clear, his stressful lifestyle is funding everything that you have. Even if your family came from money, unless your family bought that house, paid for them Chanel earrings, them Chanel bags, all the Gucci, all the things in that house, all whatever, right? He's paid for that. There is a unspoken agreement that if I'm going to pay for all of this and work my ass to the bone and be exhausted, you can take care of the kids. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's okay, but it is what it is. So if all you got to do is look cute, make sure the kids are going to be healthy, productive citizens, why are you tired? Get a motherfucking nanny, right? You know what I'm saying? Like her whole, like, the fact that she's just lonely because she wants a husband who's like her best friend who can do her bullshit things with you. And this man is working his ears to the bone, saving up his second wife fund. Right? Because his next wife, he's going to be like, nah, whatever. So I just call, like, I understand being in a relationship, being lonely. And if you're a woman who lived in the suburbs and you both worked 9 to 5 and he wasn't there, bitch, you home all motherfucking day. Yeah, you could take care of the kids. Yes, you can micromanage the kids. Yes, you can be harder on the kids. So what if he doesn't come in? He don't need to. Because if you had a husband who was there with you, with the kids, your ass couldn't afford half the shit you had now. So quit complaining that the fact that you got to do a little bit more of the work to have the life that you want to have. So, sorry, that's just what it is. Because there's a lot of broke ass people looking at her life being like, I don't need a motherfucker to show up at all. Stay there for 5 hours if you want to. I can have this motherfucker taken care of and still be cute and still fuck you and keep my mouth shut and not be in bullshit and not cause ridiculous scenes when you fucking go out in public, right? So that's why her whole poo-poo-hoo story is falling on deaf ass ears. So anyway, girl, she's exhausting as fuck. So anyway, that's it for the episode. Again, sorry it took too long, too late for you to get to it, but I'll be on time next week. Happy St. Patrick's Day and have a great rest of your week. Bye, guys.